The Legend of Zelda's main theme is so iconic. It's one of the few pieces of video game music that everybody on the planet knows, and it stands as one of Koji Kondo's crowning achievements. Written just 1 year after his other crowning achievement, the Super Mario Bros. Theme, the Zelda theme stands as an interesting contrast that mapped out Kondo's split musical personalities that carried through the 80s and 90s. Upbeat, carefree playfulness on the one hand, and dark, heroic drama on the other. The Zelda main theme is a perfect piece of music, encapsulating the feeling of a lone adventurer tossed into a wild, dangerous world. It does this through brave, melodic movements that carry out over progressively darker harmonies. The initial musical ideas get developed expertly as the piece carries on, sounding more and more dangerous until arriving at a climax of tension, portraying our hero getting deeper and deeper into trouble before a last burst of brightness tears through the tension and resolves. Our hero triumphs over evil. Let's go through the piece, pick out the core ideas, and see how the music develops these ideas as it goes. The intro to this piece is simple yet unmistakable, a perfect recipe for an iconic opening. The melody projects a heroic strength and brightness by hitting the tonic B-flat note on a B-flat chord right on beat 1 of the piece. But while this melody note is repeated in each of the following bars, the chords in each bar slide down from B-flat major to A-flat to G-flat. A-flat and G-flat are not native to the key of B-flat major, but are borrowed from the key of B-flat minor. We see our hero staying strong on that B-flat note while the harmony slides deeper and deeper into the minor key, but that final F chord sets up a return to our major tonic B-flat chord with a galloping rhythm to hype you up for the main melody. Actually, this galloping rhythm points to the first main feature of the piece that you'll notice all over the music, the clash between triplet and 16th note rhythms. This intro has 3 bars of triplet rhythms that give way into these galloping 16th notes in bar 4, and the rhythmic shift from triplets to 16ths produces this great charging up effect. Throughout the main section of the piece, we'll see lots of clashing between triplets and 16th notes, sometimes happening at the same time, so look out for that as we keep going. The main melody of the piece is so well known that it seems redundant to go over how it goes, but if we break it down, you can see how perfectly it develops its ideas. Each phrase takes the last piece of the melody and adds something to it, or twists it in a new way, giving the melody a step-by-step progression from each bar to the next. The opening bar gives us our main motif, this leap down from the root to the 5th in a strong quarter-note rhythm. This motif screams heroic, giving us the strongest notes of the chord in the strongest rhythm right from the first beat. The end of the bar here is a perfect answer to the beginning, and you can already see this scale figure as a development of the initial 2-beat idea. Instead of jumping down from the root to the 5th, we jump up from the root to the 5th above it, and then the space in between there is filled in with a run up the major scale. This major scale upward landing on the 5th feels majestic, heroic. You can basically feel it being belted out by a trumpet section, even on the NES hardware. The following phrase starts on the 5th, where we left off, and then travels up to the root above it, this high B-flat note, and once again fills in the space between these 2 notes with a run up a scale. Only this time there are 2 differences between this and the previous phrase. Instead of the B-flat major scale, used in our last run, this scale fragment uses the B-flat minor scale, and instead of a 16th note run, we use a triplet rhythm to keep the 5th and root both landing on strong downbeats. The shape of the line, where it's placed in the measure, and the repeated first note leading into the scale run up all connect this figure to the previous one, while the introduction of the triplet rhythm and the minor scale make it an evolution of that initial idea. This figure evolves again in the following bar, this time starting on the root and landing on the 5th. We continue the triplet rhythm and use the B-flat minor scale, just like the last bar, but this time, instead of a straight walk down the scale to our target note, we add a little turn, going back up a step and then finishing the scale down to the 5th of the key with this dotted 8th note to 16th note rhythm. Again, it's so obviously an extension of the previous bar's ideas, but this turn delays the resolution from the first beat of the bar to beat 2, which comes as quite a surprise, as every bar of the melody so far has resolved cleanly on beat 1. Small melodic surprises like this are the kind of thing that separates good melodies from legendary ones. So far, the melody has been different decorations of the root and fifth of the key, but the following phrases break away from that motif and instead build on the little turn figure that ended the last phrase. This next bar takes the same walk down of a third in the same rhythm, landing again on beat 2, and flips the direction so we're walking up instead of down. Then it drops the whole thing down a step, and adds a repeated note in the middle to change the dotted 8th to 16th note rhythm into the same kind of galloping rhythm we saw in the track's opening. The rhythm is close enough to the previous bar that, again, it's a clear development of that previous idea, but bringing in the extra note to call back to the galloping intro rhythm as well is just genius. This gallop up is answered with a walk back down, and this whole figure is lowered down in steps through the B-flat minor scale until it lands on this C note. This C note kicks off an abrupt shift from the B-flat minor scale to a C major figure, galloping up a C major arpeggio that resolves to an F note in the last bar of the phrase. This F, the fifth of the key, drops down for the same galloping setup that originally brought us into our melody, and it serves the same purpose here. Remember this enclosure setting up the final bar of the section here. This E jumping up to G, then resolving down to F. Taking a melodic idea and moving it down a scale in steps is called a sequence, and it's a very classical technique. You won't hear a Mozart piece that doesn't move a melody around in sequence at least once. But what's great about this ending is that it moves down in sequence through the B-flat minor scale for 2 bars, just enough time to set up an expectation, and then sucker punches us with this sudden jump to C major. This C major is a perfect setup for the 5 chord, F, and the burst of brightness brings us back to the heroic mood where we started. And it's here that we have to talk about the harmony. Just looking at the melody, we can see that it's like 99% in B-flat minor, so it almost seems wrong to say the piece is in B-flat major. But it is in B-flat major, and starting in a major key but borrowing so heavily from the darker parallel minor key creates this effect of a hero standing up against overwhelming odds. We start on a B-flat major chord, and just like the intro, descend in whole steps through borrowed chords from B-flat minor, A-flat, then G-flat. The expectation for this progression was set up by the intro, which had this descent continuing down to an F, which worked as a perfect springboard to get us back up to B-flat. But in the melody section, this G-flat chord abruptly turns and resolves up to a surprise D-flat major chord. The melody has been structured around the tent poles of the root and the fifth of the key up till this point, but this sudden swerve to D-flat makes it sound like we're now in the key of D-flat major. The harmony continues to get even darker now, and we sink from D-flat down a whole step to C-flat, or B major, which you can probably imagine is very distant from our original home key of B-flat. This sinks down in step with the sequenced melody line to a B-flat minor chord. This chain of chords puts us not in the key of B-flat minor, but in the mode of B-flat Phrygian, which is a step even darker than the regular minor key. The flat 2 chord, C-flat, I know, but it is technically C-flat, resolving to the minor 1 chord is an ominous sound indeed. We've been lowered deeper and deeper into a pit with no way out, and that's why this surprise turn to C major that we talked about in the melody hits so hard. We're exploding out of the dark Phrygian mode into a place even brighter than where we started. You can basically tell how to make a key feel darker by adding flats to the key signature, and you can make it feel brighter by removing flats or adding sharps. This moves you in one direction or another around the circle of fifths. So, going from B-flat major to B-flat Phrygian adds 4 flats, a deep and dark descent. But suddenly bringing in a C major, which has an E natural note in it, requires a wild swing the other way that loses 5 flats. Our hero is exploding out of the belly of the beast, sword in hand and victory within his grasp. And of course, C perfectly sets up the final F chord that brings us back home. Koji Kondo managed to create this journey while keeping his focus on the practical side of writing music for games. The piece has to be able to loop in a smooth and satisfying way. The structure of this melody is totally unique compared to most game music. Each chord movement and melodic phrase moves as a step-by-step progression, each bar building on the last without ever repeating an idea or figure exactly. It's immensely satisfying too, and when we get back to the top of the form, we think we're ready to hear the whole thing again. But in reality, the music moves from this 8-bar A section to a B section that starts in the same place, but takes us somewhere even darker. The melody is smartly arranged for the NES hardware with lots of held notes that leave space for the inner voice to move. Just about every single bar features some echoing of melodic fragments in this inner voice up until the 3rd bar of the B section. The first 2 bars are identical to the first time around, which puts us in a false sense of security. But then bar 3 sees the melody reaching up to this held note over our G-flat chord. This note kicks off a new melodic direction, one that's more rhythmically simple, but a lot more emotionally dramatic. We jump from the 3rd to the 5th of our G-flat chord and then resolve down to the 5th of the following F chord and drop down to the 3rd. And the inner voice hits the flat 7th of both chords to make this a G-flat 7 to F7 move. It's at this point that we realize we've been duped, and the melody isn't going to go the way it did the first time, but it's actually also a callback to the end of the A section. Where this outlined C major chord made a nice enclosure of the 5th of the key, drawing us perfectly to the F chord at the end of the section, this G-flat chord makes the same kind of enclosure around the chord tones of this following F. Using the inner voice to harmonize this melody gives this figure extra weight. We can tell it's important because it's not being obscured by inner counterline movement like the rest of the melody was. And this swerve off of the beaten path brings us to the climax of the piece. The following phrase takes this melodic idea, the 3rd jump up, resolving to a 3rd jump down a step below, and harmonizes it with a truly bizarre move. Instead of moving from a G-flat chord to an F, which sounds dramatic enough on its own, each of these F chords is approached by a bizarre kind of E diminished 7 chord. The bass rockets up this dramatic triplet arpeggio outlining an E diminished 7 chord without its 3rd, but instead of outlining the chord in the melody, we get this held B natural and F sharp. This puts the natural 5th of the chord over top of the flat 5th and gives us the 2nd of the chord rather than the flat 3rd. These notes combined take us out of any one diminished scale. We can't be an E whole half diminished, which has an F sharp in it, because of the B natural. But while E half whole diminished, the other diminished scale option, has a B natural in it, it doesn't have an F sharp. You could add up all of the notes in these bars and say it's derived from some harmonic minor scale mode, but the bass figure is so clearly outlining an E diminished 7 sound that it's impossible not to hear it as some kind of E diminished chord. And it would be so easy and obvious to have this middle voice land on a B flat rather than a B natural, but Kondo didn't do that. This had to have been a deliberate choice. So we have an anomaly. A bar that sounds alien, crunchy, uncomfortable, and then resolves super cleanly to an F chord in the following bar. I kind of like to think of it as a polychord, an F sharp sus to F sharp move over top of an E diminished 7, because both of these moves individually work well resolving to F major, even if they don't necessarily fit together. Anyway, that's as nerdy as I'll get in this video. After this big dramatic climax, the same melodic figure is brought down to outline our old C-flat to B-flat minor resolution, once again putting us into the B-flat Phrygian mode. But this time, coming out of the tension of that last phrase, this C-flat to B-flat minor move feels mournful. Out of our lowest moment, the hero rises, and the same C to F galloping ending comes back to bring us back to the top of the loop. And, just like in the intro, the shift from a prolonged triplet rhythm into these galloping sixteenths gets our motor running and makes rocketing us back to our B-flat major tonic chord feel extra satisfying. It's kind of unbelievable how such a short piece of music could have such an impact, but the more I look at it, the more clear it is just how much genius was packed into every single note. Every note feeds into the next, every rhythm is meticulously chosen, and every chord is placed exactly right to create an epic journey from our safe haven down into the belly of the beast, with twists and turns along the way, the music erupting in a deadly climax before the hero triumphs over darkness and brings us back home. This is a perfect piece of music, and it brilliantly evokes a hero's adventure and victory over evil. Of course, the Zelda theme took over the world. It's impossible for a piece this deep to go unnoticed. Thank you so much for indulging me in this analysis. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you want to support what I do, please consider joining my Patreon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.